Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined by awesome co-hosts Nate Heininger. How are you doing, Nate?
I am doing well, and always making sure now to carry an extra tank of gas in my car. I have been inspired by the game that we're covering today. Be prepared.
And Laura Nash, how are you doing, Laura?
I would be doomed to the apocalypse if we had to drive, but it seems like the future is maybe some kind of train, so I'll be fine.
All right. And this week we are talking about a game that was recently recommended by a longtime friend of the show, Christian, a.k.a. Indie Game Enthusiast, or IG_enthusiast on Twitter. So thank you so much, Christian, for recommending yet another totally awesome game. And the game we're talking about this week is Far Lone Sails.
Christian, you've done it again. This is awesome.
Yeah, he found a game that was basically 30 different things that we like in a short game in one game, and you can play it in 3 hours. And everybody who played it, all three of us, were like, yes, we see why Christian recommended it for our podcast.
Within moments.
It was extremely our shit.
It is extremely our shit. It is made in a lab to be on our podcast.
Yes.
I was like 3 minutes in. I was like, cool.
Yep.
Cool. I'm digging it.
Absolutely. So this is a really neat game. I'm going to give sort of a high-level overview of it before we dive into talking about our experiences with it. But Far Lone Sails, that is Far, Lone Sails. Wait, is that the right punctuation?
Let's just talk about this now.
My biggest quibble is the name of the game, because I cannot remember it.
Right? It's not the greatest title.
It's far and it has the word sails in it. We've called it Forlorn Wolf at one point, I called it. Why not?
I'm getting shades of Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons again on this. Just a name that doesn't mean anything.
I think in terms of like bad titles, Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons is just slightly worse than Far Lone Sails.
Far Lone Sails is a accurate name in terms of tone, but it is just so very forgettable.
Developers, you don't need a two-part title if this is unless it's a new game in a recurring series. You know, if this was Battlefield Lone Sails, then yes, sure use the thing. But you could have just called this Far, or you could have just called it Lone Sails. Either one of those would have worked. Why did we need both? Now I have to say Far Lone Sails a zillion times in this episode. What have you done to us?
You wouldn't have known. If it wasn't for the title, we wouldn't have known that you had to travel both far and while using your lone sails. So, it's very literal.
There's actually like
one
3
mast,
sails.
but there are multiple sails on that
There
mast.
are, that's
so
true.
It is lone sails plural, but like it's also like you're a lone sails. It's not a good title.
Also, for sails being in the title, they're like a quarter of the equation of what you're actually like. They're actually the least thing that you manage in this game too, is the sails. If it was like shitty engine, I think that would have been more.
This ain't no Abzu. It's not like sail your boat on a sea of pirates and avoid fishes. That is not what this game is.
Far, hope it don't break. That would have been more.
Busted vehicle.
So Far is I don't want to call it a platform game because there's not really a lot of jumping on platforms, but it is a game in which you are traveling. It is a journey from left to right. So in that way, it kind of reminds me a lot of games like Inside. You're a character going on a mysterious journey across a ruined world, and it plays out mostly in a sort of 2D or sort of, I guess, 2.5D-ish kind of layout. But the twist, or the thing that makes this game stand apart from games like Inside, is that in this game, you're not just running, jumping, solving puzzles, and making your way across this world. You have a super cool car.
Yeah, like a machine that is... on the screen, your character is, maybe a 20th of this overall screen size. It's tiny, and the car, the machine, the train thing is half the screen. So that is it dominates most of the landscape. And so that is your main mode of movement, is making this car go forward.
Yeah, it's about sort of driving this incredible and fairly complicated conveyance. This thing that looks like a gigantic train engine crossed with a sailboat, crossed with a tractor, just sort of trundling across this sort of deserted, ruined landscape. And trying to make sure the thing doesn't break down, trying to keep it running. That's sort of the core of the game.
It's a road trip to the right in which you don't exactly know where you're going, and it's not like you stop at destinations along the way. Although there's puzzles, it's not really like you go to a land and then you explore the land. No, you're just trying to get your car through, and there's a wheel in the way or a propeller in the way, or your sails don't fit and you need to get that bridge to go. It is a game where the main objective is to move forward, and not in a Mario way. Like, it literally is all you're doing, and it's pretty desolate outside, but it's not like a scary game like we've had in some of the other ones. It is inside-y in that you move to the right, but it's not gonna give you nightmares. It's got a little girl in a big colorful coat, but it's not Little Nightmares.
Yeah,
you burn things, but it's not Little Inferno.
I thought I kind of felt like some similarities to Journey in that way, where, you know, all you know is that you have to keep moving forward. It's way more linear than Journey in that you just are moving left to right, where Journey is, you know, in a 3D space, but you don't know anything about who you are. You don't know anything about why you're moving forward. You just know that you need to continue to move forward.
And the world is sort of the most interesting thing about this. I mean, actually, the vehicle and managing the vehicle is really fun and interesting and mechanical. But the most interesting thing from sort of an atmosphere perspective is just like the world around you is telling a really interesting story. You know, it's this totally ruined world full of wrecks of giant machines, full of dry lake beds or sea beds. It's empty of people. It's clear that there were people here and now they're all gone. And so it's this really interesting, like, what happened here? Why is this world like this? And why is this little person, I kind of assumed it was a little girl, but that may not even be the case. Why is this little person driving this massive machine across this wasteland? It's sort of mysterious and atmospheric and really interesting. Kept me involved in the whole process the whole time.
Yeah, and you don't start in the car. You just start moving left to right, and then you find it. And we really got to decide if we call it a car or a machine. I think machine is more.
I think we can call it a vehicle. The developers on their website call this game, I think this is a great phrase. I'm sure they labored over it for probably years. It is an atmospheric vehicle adventure, which I think captures the game really well. It's extremely atmospheric, and that's sort of the main draw. The vehicle is your main interaction, and in terms of what type of game this is, it's really hard to put a label on it, but I think adventure is as close as you could probably get without making it quote unquote like, you know, like LucasArts style point and click adventure. Yeah. It's an adventure game, but it's not an adventure game.
Something that really bothers me in most post-apocalyptic games is that you either are spending all your time on survival, and that means killing things, or you're spending a lot of time on investigating what happened. And this game isn't really super concerned with either. It really is a game about momentum, moving forward, and unlike a lot of games that get very pretentious where you're just sitting and watching things happen and you don't really have to take a active choice in anything, you're kind of just letting the game happen to you. This game forces you to actually manage your vehicle. You're constantly trying to, you know, change levers and move forward. Like, you have to do things in this game to move forward, and you can zoom out and see the landscape, and you can kind of, when things are peaceful, enjoy the pace changing. But it really isn't one thing or the other. It doesn't just make you sit and wait and think about the end of the world, and it's not saying every 2 seconds you're going to die. This game is not about killing you every 5 seconds. It is about you moving forward.
Yeah, there are no enemies in this game, which is like, I keep comparing it to Inside because I loved Inside, and I felt like there was a lot of shared DNA here. But one of the biggest differences is Inside delighted in killing you, and that was part of the fun of the game, was that the world was out to destroy you, and the deaths of that game were amazing. This game, there are no enemies, and there's almost no ways to die in the game. It's mostly just a matter of getting your machine across the landscape, and that's the whole challenge. Maybe we ought to go ahead and talk about managing the vehicle, the machine, because that is sort of the meat of the game. When you start this game, like Nate said, you're not actually in the machine. You're at what looks like a grave, and then you go from that grave into a house that is full of plans and schematics, and it's clear that whoever lived here was an inventor and was working on a gigantic machine. And you find the machine itself, and you climb aboard it, and off you go. And it starts off relatively simple. It adds systems onto the machine as you go, but the main kind of core stuff that you start with is your gigantic machine, your locomotive-like vehicle, has a boiler that you can put fuel into, and it has a button you can hit to start it.
Yeah, and the fuel, though, is your standard Back to the Future style junk thing, where you can basically put anything that you can grab into to burn or whatever it does.
Yes, it has a Mr. Fusion.
Fuel. Yes.
Everything burns.
Yep.
And something I really appreciated about the ship was no tutorials. You just start pressing buttons and figuring out what each thing does, and you can screw it up, and that's great.
Yeah, I didn't even realize for sure that I was in, I'd seen the images of the game that you're in some sort of vehicle, but didn't even fully realize that I was in the vehicle that I was going to be controlling until I really started getting going with it. And just in case you're having a hard time like visualizing it, the game, you're controlling this little person, it's all side-scrolling left to right, and so whenever you're inside of the vehicle, it does the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, like vivisection or cutaway, where like yeah, the side of it is transparent and you see into the vehicle. And this is where Reagan was kind of talking about, it's kind of platformy, where the areas of the vehicle are separated. You actually have to travel with your little character from the boiler over to the other things. And I know you were listing them off.
So something about that, according to the Gamma Sutra article about this game, one of the inspirations for it was a book that I had when I was a kid and loved, which was Incredible Cross Sections. Do you remember those? The books,
cross section, not vivisection. That's what
yeah,
I was thinking.
yeah.
Vivisection is
very different thing.
I would play a vivisection game.
Incredible Cross Sections was this great series of books of like it'd be these gigantic full page illustrations of like the Titanic cut in half, so you could see a cross section of where all the stuff was inside it, that kind of thing. And so you're essentially playing in a cross section of this gigantic locomotive vehicle, and so inside it's like a little tiny miniature platformer level. You're constantly running from room to room, from space to space within the vehicle to try to keep the various systems of the vehicle running.
It reminds me of two things. One, also one of my favorite movies, Life Aquatic, with Steve Zissou, when he says, "Let me show you my boat," and they go through all of that. Awesome scene. Also, if you follow the games that we cover, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time.
Oh, good, yeah.
Not exactly the same, but pretty similar. And it's
I didn't think about that. You're right, because that has the same kind of mechanic of like you control a character within a vehicle and have to rush from place to place within the vehicle to control the various parts of it.
Exactly. So like the button to start the boiler is a gap away from the button to load fuel into the ship, all which is on the second level of the vehicle. So you can make that jump from the boiler section where you start it and where you release the steam, as well as apply the brake, over to where you add more fuel. But if you are below, you actually have to hit a little button on an elevator or time your jump perfectly to go up to the second level. So there's a lot of like in the moment finesse platforming that isn't incredibly difficult, but if you mess it up, it can make you like you fall down a level, you have to get on the elevator and you try to get up there to do the thing.
Yeah, and the
short
worst
amount of time.
punishment there is that it can cause your vehicle to stall and lose speed, which, isn't a major consequence. Your character isn't dying, but part of the joy of this game is like figuring out the systems of the ship or whatever well enough that you can then get your vehicle up to speed and cruising along, and you're just doing little bits of things like perfect timing to manage the steam, manage the boiler, manage the fuel, keep the like throttle pressed or whatever you call it. That feeling of like being like mastering the vehicle and moving at speed with it across this beautiful, if desolate, landscape, that's really cool. Like that's something that I mean, Inside didn't have that. That's really a great feeling in this game.
Yeah.
And once things are really churning along, that's the times when I would hit the top. I was using a controller and I was kind of zooming out and looking at the landscape and enjoying it as we puttered along, because I knew nothing was going to be on fire in the next 30 seconds. So I could kind of enjoy the weirdness of the world and take a look outside. You can't do that when everything is sparking, but
yeah, I don't think there's any other game that is like this. When you have everything going like that, it just feels so good and so strange and so satisfying. I think of like I can't think of a specific example, but there's all those movies of like steampunky sort of things where there's like that weird engineer who's pulling a ton of levers at the same time and like throwing coal into the thing, and everything is like kind of on fire but also running at perfectly at the same time. You just feel like your whole vehicle is falling apart and you are just barely keeping it running.
it is so much more interesting that they play with scale and that you're controlling this by jumping up and hitting stuff with your head and, pulling levers with your entire body. And the fact that the fire hose is pretty much your entire size. And when you shoot it out, it's 4 times bigger than you. That's so much better than if you were in a tiny cabin and trying to do it at a very small scale, pulling a lever you can handle. It is so much more fun for it to be big.
Yeah, it's like Space Team, but if your phone was the size of your house, like it's
Space Team is great.
Yeah, it's such a really neat mechanic, and I love that they continually add new systems to your vehicle as you go. I don't think this is too much of a spoiler to talk about some of these because they do come a little later in the game, but obviously the first one that you get, which is sort of the name of the game, is that you equip you're starting to run out of fuel and you equip your vehicle with sails, and the sails only work if there's wind, but if there is wind, then you can turn off the engine of the machine and just sort of let it run. And those moments are probably the most quiet zen moments in the game. It does a really great job of sort of going back and forth between these like frantic engine management, my stuff is on fire parts, and these sort of chill, oh good, everything's working again and I can put up the sails and just glide on through a beautiful landscape. Balancing those two kind of vibes back and forth was something this game did really, really well.
Yeah, it's like, in those games, Brothers has it, but I think Journey has it as well, where they put like a park bench in it for you to sit and sort of just like soak it all in.
I always think of Eco with that.
Eco, yeah. In between moments of stress
the Abzu
or
meditation rocks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that, but it's built in. I mean, I guess technically you don't have to unfurl the sails, but you probably should.
I think if you don't use the sails, you'll probably run out of fuel in those lengthy, open spaces. And man, you got to put the sails then.
I mean, and people are going to talk a lot about level design in the puzzles when you kind of hit a stopping point and have to get through. But a lot of the careful tweaking that made this game great was when they have the wind blowing in the right direction, when you can put the sail up and relax, what they put in the background at that point, and then when they have the wind reverse direction or have rain or hail or something else come in that makes it a much more intense moment, because they control that stuff beautifully, and that's what makes this feel like a journey instead of just a series of random events. This would not be half as interesting if it was roguelike random. I think they've really carefully designed when everything happens so that you have much more of a curated experience. I hate that phrase, but it's very, very tweaked. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels almost like it's like generated, like, okay, here's a farm that I'm going through. There's windmills in the background. But I think it is by choice. Everything, the sun is setting, you go through a night phase, there's a storm with the lightning. Everything is very specific, and I think it's a decided pacing. You can choose it a little bit how you will interact with these things depending on how well you run your vehicle. Are you keeping it at a good speed, or are you constantly letting it boil over and die? Things like that. But for the most part, I think they have a general idea of where you're going to be and what it's going to look like and the speed that you're going to move, and it feels really good all throughout.
Something I really loved was how they balanced having something that's very muted and very industrial feeling, and then they've got these giant splashes of color, usually to tell you what to do. Like, hey, there's a red hook. You should use that red hook to solve this puzzle because it's red and it's right there, and everything else is in this muted color. But it's muted, but it's not just grays and blacks. They put sunsets in. It's a dystopia, but it's not just ugly and barren.
It's a really beautiful post-apocalypse.
They've got a lot of the nice colors from like Alto's Adventure in there. It's not quite as fluorescent, but it's got a lot of personality. And I'm just maybe sick of dirty dystopia. And there's so much smoke in this game. It's pretty dirty, but like it's not like filthy, gross dead bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into too much before we hit the spoiler break, but it looks like very early on it sort of becomes clear that like this is a world that had an ocean and now the ocean is gone. So there's these things that seem to have once been islands, little pastoral islands, that are now essentially just hills, beautiful green hills in a sort of dusty brown sea of sand. And it's really picturesque while still being like kind of distressing to see like, oh, this place dried up and, you know, blew away. There's nothing here anymore. And then you start seeing these massive machines that, you know, you have to wonder, okay, were these massive machines, were these part of the cause for the ocean drying up, or were these part of their way of handling that after it dried up, but not quite enough? You know, it's really mysterious. And it does continually sort of drop hints about what the history of this world is. Never quite so much that you feel like, oh, now I'm getting the exposition. But you really do kind of pick up a lot of detail about like what happened here, what happened in this world.
Yeah. You know, we've talked a lot about Inside, and I think that is the game that makes the most sense visually, and the fact that you're moving left and right. But tonally and atmospherically, Laura, you already said it. If you happen to have played Little Inferno or Human Resource Machine, it feels like you are in that world. You don't know.
Realistic version.
Yeah, maybe
of
a little
world.
less jokey, but I totally know what you mean.
I
Yeah.
mean, how that black snow. There's a part where this, you know, black tinted snow comes raining down from some industrial machines, and that's from Little Inferno too. Like it's an image that's in both.
So we were starting to kind of list off some of the like ship systems, and I kind of wanted to talk about some of the others that we haven't really mentioned yet, just because there's so many little. The ship gets expanded and modified, and new doodads get added to it, and so many of them kind of add some new twist to, you know, some new thing that you have to manage as you're rolling along. You know, obviously we mentioned that the ship has a sort of fuel converter that turns things into fuel for your boiler, and the you know basic system of like press a thing to throttle up and a brake, and the sails. But then there's other stuff that gets added on as you go. There's two two types of repair that you have to do on your ship. So you get a fire hose to put out fires, and a little sort of, I guess, welding device to help if you get these sort of electrical sparky problems with your ship. You have to go and use the sort of welder on them. And both of those are fun to use. And anytime something would go wrong with the ship, it was a matter of like, okay, do I have time to like let it ride and continue, or do I need to go fix this thing right away? And then later on, you add this cool vacuum to the back of your ship. One of the most time-consuming things early in the game is having to stop the ship to go out and get fuel, walk it back into the ship one piece at a time, because you can only carry one at a time, and then put it someplace where you can store it until you're ready to burn it. Well, getting the little vacuum saves you having to do that. You can just roll over or something and it goes straight into a little holding room. You still have to go and put it in your fuel bunker or whatever. So, am I forgetting anything cool?
There's some winches on the front and the back of the vehicle that you'll use for various winch, things, pulling things or pulling yourself towards things. As you would expect a winch to do.
And if you want, you can use those little hook winches to pull the vehicle along. You go incredibly slowly, but there are some situations where it's convenient to be able to literally get out of the vehicle and like pull it backwards 5 feet, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of my favorite things about the ship was there are these hooks everywhere that are for decorative purposes, and you're picking up stuff everywhere. It's a lot of stuff you're supposed to burn, but sometimes you pick up something that seems very antique in this dystopia, very handmade, very curated. And you can keep your potted plant or your sailboat and hoard them where you can burn them.
Or the radio. I loved the little radio.
The radio, you can hang lights up so that your ship isn't quite so dark when you have nighttime. Like it feels like a way to make it your story.
Yeah.
And there's not often a lot of opportunity in these kind of games for that.
Yeah, the hooks actually, like, they have a utilitarian purpose. Yeah, there's hooks in almost all of the rooms, but particularly there's hooks near the fuel system, because you can put your fuel on those hooks and then you don't have to jump over it every time you go from one place to another. But you're right, there's hooks in the in the entryways of the ship, and there's hooks in the bedroom. The ship has a bedroom. It's the only useless room in the ship, except it's so cute that she has a little bedroom in her ship, and you can go and hang things up in the bedroom. I loved that. I put the little radio and a potted plant in there, and those stayed with me for the entire rest of the game.
Yeah. It is also, if you start the game, if you have to stop and restart, you start in the bedroom, like getting
true.
up in the room. There's so much like a strange amount of customization for what you're actually doing in this game, and it's all if you want it or not, because any item that you can pick up can also be consumed for fuel. So like there's a chair that starts in your room, and really early in the game I was like, I need more fuel, so I burnt the chair up, and I was like, dang it, I wish I still had that chair in my room. So I also put the radio in there. It'd be interesting to see who, like, the different types of things people decide to put in their room.
And the room has some, like, art on the walls. What I love about the ship is so obviously, like, this little girl did not build this ship herself. You start the game standing in front of what appears to be a grave, probably of your father. And because there's a portrait of a man at the grave. And then the ship, if you go outside the ship, on the prow, there's a cute little stick figure drawing of what looks like an adult man and a small child. And inside the ship, there's that bedroom that's clearly been decorated for the child. And there's something kind of like sad and touching about this. It's clear that like this child and her father or whomever built this machine together to take a journey together, and that didn't happen. Something happened to the father, and she's going on alone. And that was poignant right from the very first moment, and it added this little emotional dimension to the game that, like, looking at something like Inside, which, while I love that game so much, like, it's a bit more mysterious as to, like, what is this kid doing? Why is he going here? Why is he going from left to right? You don't know why the little girl is driving this gigantic machine across this barren landscape, but you do kind of know sort of what started that journey. Like there was a plan with her and this adult, this probably father figure, and now he's gone and she's trying to continue it alone.
Side note, I was doing additional research while you were talking and found out her name is Lone.
Oh.
I was like, is it a girl? And it was like, her name is Lone.
They don't give you names for almost anything in this. I wonder where they probably did hide that someplace. I found that the company that made this game is called Okomotive. This is their first game. And there are some subtle details. For example, at a later point in the game, there is a area where you can see sort of a gallery of paintings of machines, and the machines have labels. And there's a painting of your machine, and it is labeled Okomotive. And so the vehicle in this game, they don't call it this on the website for the company, but the vehicle is called an Okomotive, which I think is a cute name. There's a lot of it's clear they thought about lore and then kind of decided, well, we don't need to drop a whole lot of it in this game.
Yeah, let you find it for yourself if you want to.
Right. Or not. With the name, Lone, I don't know where we would have spotted that in the game, but I guess it's nice to know.
Makes me feel a little worse about making fun of the name of the game.
No.
I don't know.
It's still pretty
No,
bad.
it's still pretty bad.
It's still
yeah,
bad.
that doesn't change it.
Although,
Now,
Lone Sales is now, I guess, a description of the action of the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are Lone Sales?
But there's a colon.
Lone Sales Far
Yeah.
would have made more sense.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Langeloff all over again.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about running the vehicle and kind of what gets you out of the vehicle. There's two things that primarily get you out of the vehicle. One is you need to get more fuel, but also there are pre-constructed obstacles. You might call them puzzles. Some of them are more puzzly than others. Some that just basically require you to get out of the ship and press some buttons. But they are, I believe, dedicated pacing things, as well as something that give you a little bit more to do than just running around pressing buttons in your ship.
I know there's other games that have done this, and it's just that this happens to be, and this is not a great comparison, but this just happens to be the one that's in my brain because I've been playing it lately. This has that kind of Titanfall 2 kind of vibe, where you have a gigantic machine and you have a tiny person, and you have to get them both from point A to point B, and so often tiny person has to go places where giant machine can't go, or giant machine has to go places where tiny person wouldn't be safe. And so knowing or discovering when you need to get out of your giant machine and do something as the tiny person versus doing things in the giant machine is the game. And all of the obstacles are mostly things where it's this would be not an obstacle for tiny person on her own. It's only an obstacle because you can't abandon your vehicle, and your vehicle is too large to fit through a lot of spaces.
Yeah, they have little tiny barricades, so if you decide the solution to a puzzle is to run to the right, and you're going to hit some kind of tree that's going to keep you from moving.
Yeah, I found eventually you hit an invisible wall where Lone just stops walking.
Yeah, they usually stick a stick in the way or something that you just hit. But it's, sometimes the ship will, at an appropriate speed, just ram through things. And sometimes you'll hit it and you'll stop. And the answer is to build up all your speed and hit steam and ram through. And the other 50% of the time you do that and everything in your ship catches on fire because they're that was not the answer to the puzzle.
No.
But I'm telling you, sometimes it is the answer. Sometimes
there were a couple of times where I got stuck, and that was all it was. I just didn't think to ram it.
I was 2 feet too far to the left, and I needed to move forward and hit an invisible button. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I found that most of the time, if Lone, as we now know her name to be, was involved in the puzzle, you would see little ramps and little things on the screen. It's almost always get out of the vehicle and find a little tunnel or a little series of ramps to go up and press a button. if there were no ramps visible, then I knew I just needed to get more speed with
Yeah.
my car. And that like concept literally never failed me. I was right every single time.
Yeah, not a like difficult puzzle game. You notice that they did not call it a puzzle game in the description on their website. It's mostly just about finding ways to overcome obstacles. I wouldn't quite call any of this puzzles. It's just obstacles, but interesting obstacles still.
Yeah, and thematically very interesting. It'll be like a giant abandoned buildings or crazy radio towers or all the stuff that you would, want to kind of explore a little bit in a post-apocalyptic game.
And we've talked so much about, post-apocalyptic, industrial, all this stuff, but one of the things that I was so taken by in this game is the sound effects. The music is good.
It's got great
but
sound.
There's just, it's so rich, and it's sometimes all you're hearing is the sound of the steam going off and the fire, these little tiny sounds of you. Everything you move makes a noise, and it sounds, your ship is just terrible. It's like always falling apart. It's clanking, and it sounds like a really dirty car.
But then you hit those like
endearing.
straightaways, and there's wind, and you put the sails up, and you hear that wonderful sound of like wind in the sails, and the sort of creaking back and forth of the wheels, and
there's music that plays, I think, only when you're really going.
Yeah.
And it just feels great.
It's probably the most atmospheric part to me. The colors and the backgrounds are really terrific, but for me, the sound is what really took me on this game.
It is a beautiful game, but yeah, you're right, absolutely great sound. And the soundtrack is also very, very good. I haven't actually downloaded the soundtrack. They have a pack where you can get the game plus an art book plus the soundtrack for a little bit more than the cost of the game, and I kind of wish I had done that, because the soundtrack to this was really, really nice. I'll try to put as much of it as I can manage into the episode. It's just a really nice, I guess I would call it sort of modern classical sort of soundtrack.
Yeah, actually, Laura, you said Alto's Adventure earlier in the game, and I get a little bit of that when you're the music that plays when you are really trucking along feels similar to what's happening during Alto's Adventure.
I love that they do have different music, not just for different levels, but for different speeds. And so when you are really, really rolling along, you get this very happy music. And then when you're stopped at an obstacle, it changes.
And if you have lit everything in your entire vehicle on fire, the music is super intense. There's all this clanging noises, but it's very, not only is the music super high strung, but the edges of your screen go red. They say atmospheric, and it's not one atmosphere. Shout out to the credits actually include all of the different band members who do the music, including a flugelhorn player and a mandolin and a double bass, which I didn't know was a thing.
I love the word flugelhorn. Just love it.
Yeah. By Fornat Hafliger.
Nice job, Fornat.
Nice job, Fornat.
Fortunat Hafliger. Nice job.
I'm sure he's
flugelhornist.
listening and appreciates our call out.
Indeed. Yeah, the sound, the music, the visuals of the game, all of it was really, really good. I hesitate to say much about this before we hit the spoiler break. I think there was a lot about this game, particularly early on, that grabbed me in a way that few games like this did. I don't think it nailed the landing in a way that, in quite the same way that we were constantly comparing it to Inside. I don't think it quite nailed its third act the same way that Inside did. But what game possibly could? I mean, I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't played Inside, but the last act of Inside had my jaw on the floor.
Yeah, and controversial though, not everyone liked the ending to Inside. I know we loved it, I loved it, but that is a particular way to handle the ending to a game. And they went for it with Inside.
They did. This game still has has what I consider a really good ending, but it's not the like jaw-dropping ending of something like Inside.
But I don't think it is ever promising a jaw-dropping
No,
ending
true.
whatsoever.
True.
You would never expect to be, it is not Westworld.
No.
This game is not about the twists. It's a little more like Journey, and like, the journey is the destination. You will stop. That's not a spoiler. The game has to end.
Yeah, it's a good ending. We'll talk about it post spoiler break. We'll talk about it after the spoiler break. I don't want to talk too much more about the ending. But it's a great game start to finish. The game is 3 hours ish, which is, and it's available right now on Steam for Windows, PC, and Mac for $14.99. And the developers have said that it is also coming to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, although they don't have a date for that yet. So, question marks on that. It'll probably come out on those platforms. I would guess sometime this year, but I don't know that for sure. I played it on Windows. It ran great. Nate had some trouble with some bugs, so it might be worth avoiding the Mac version if you have access to a Windows PC.
Yeah.
I had no problems, for the record, on my Mac laptop, but I know that Nate's were kind of
game breaking. So I've held off until the very end of this because I really, really enjoyed this game, and I don't want to let my individual experience, because it could be my computer, though. I have not had problems like this before with games, but the ending for the game for me was when the map glitched out and my vehicle just over the edge, just down into an endless well of white space.
Nate showed me a video of this, and while disappointing, it was hilarious.
Yeah, I've got some very funny videos. It happened multiple different ways. I tried a lot of different things to make it not happen, and I just it was just the world ran out, and I just fell forever.
Into white heaven.
Yeah, exactly. So
you won. You won the game, Nate. I can't
really
believe that all of us got the bad ending.
Yep. It was a very avant-garde way to end a game. I don't let it discourage you, but it is going to make it where I am not going to be a part of the post-spoiler, because I'm going to try it on a different computer and see if I can still finish it or what. It's just such a strange issue.
Yeah, try it on Windows if you have the option. I mean, I would be willing to bet that the PlayStation and Xbox versions are probably coming along pretty soon. So if you don't have or aren't really like into playing on Windows or on, I don't want to risk running the Mac version that apparently works for some folks and not so well for others. Maybe there'll be a bug fix by the time you hear this. I don't know. But yeah, maybe wait for the PlayStation version if you are the patient sort.
Yeah. And despite my experience, I do really recommend this game. I assume that I'll find a way to finish it, either with a different machine, or I might send like my videos to the dev team or something, see if this is a known issue, because I really enjoyed this game. We play a lot of unique games on this show, and I think this really, we have compared it to other things throughout this entire episode, but I really don't think any other game that we've played feels the same way as this game. Nothing plays like this, and the when you're really going, it's almost like there's another game to compare it to. It kind of feels like Sonic sometimes when you like when you really get rolling, like momentum. Like there's just so much going on in this game.
I would play a Sonic game with no obstacles and just lots of fun loops.
Just going, yeah.
Yes.
There's just so much going on with this game while also being like beautifully empty, and I don't know. It's a real success, and I hope it is a success. Because the developers really tried something with this game, and I really recommend it. I hope that everyone plays it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they're getting really well-deserved good reviews, and I do know this is good hope for you, Nate, for finishing the game. They've already sent a couple patches through. One of them was just because the music you hear on the radio, somebody came up and said, we own the copyright to this and was taking down videos. So they've already updated, so there's different radio songs.
Oh, funny.
So I know they're really paying attention to people reporting stuff. So
Yeah.
hopefully no one else is getting your Abyss, but maybe someone reported your Abyss and you'll get
Maybe it'll
money.
be fixed. Yeah.
So before we go to our spoiler break, we have been at the end of each episode recently been adding a segment that we've so far been tentatively titling "What's Making You Happy This Week." So Laura, what's making you happy this week?
So I recommended TV the first week for Killing Eve, but I have been looking for a replacement happy, everyone likes each other sitcom. I ran out of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I've seen Parks and Rec many times. Basically, anything Michael Schur has made usually fills that niche.
What a roller coaster of emotions with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, though, right?
I know.
The cancellation and then picked up. Yeah.
Yeah, in the same hours apart.
Yeah.
Not even enough time for me to tweet on Twitter. But in my search for
I found time.
I was a couple hours behind, so it was very much like scroll up. Oh, yay, it's already been renewed. Yeah. But what I'm actually recommending is the sitcom Superstore, which I wrote off as a stupid comedy. I mean, it's on NBC. It is set basically in a Walmart ripoff.
It's set in St. Louis, right?
It's set in St. Louis. Yeah. It's set in like a Walmart clone in St. Louis, and it's just about people who don't really like their job. And I thought it was going to be full of jerks and the weird things that are associated with like, oh, we're like working class people. No, it's just like a bunch of people who hate their jobs and are kind of assholes who hang out at work all the time. It's great. I really, everyone's charming. There's got a lot of chemistry. Some people have bought into it. It's a good ensemble comedy, and I really feel stupid for just ignoring it for 3 seasons.
Wow. Well, your last recommendation, Killing Eve, was so solid that I might have to take this one too. What's making me happy this week was that I, on a bored whim, I decided that maybe I should check out the Yakuza series, which is a long-running series of sort of action brawler, sort of adventure story-driven games from, I guess Sega is the publisher, not the developer. I don't know who the developer is. Anyway, so it took me a while to figure out, like, okay, where do you jump on with a series that has 7 entries in it? And all of them are pretty big, long games. And so I decided to jump in with Yakuza Kiwami, which is a remake of the very first game and is only $20 on the PS4. I think they were, making a wise decision there to try to bring people into the series with a modern remake of this old PS2 game that is, inexpensive but it's really, really nicely produced, well done game. I'm really liking it a lot. The main character is so over the top, like hard ass. Kiryu is this very hard ass Yakuza type, but the story is this wild, over the top Yakuza mob story. And he's this incredibly violent guy, but they really want to make sure that you like him. So they do things like, for example, in the first third of the game, he rescues an adorable orphan, and then not 10 minutes later, rescues a puppy from being stoned to death by mean, bad mobsters, and then gives the puppy to the little girl. And it's like, okay, Kiryu, we know that you're a Yakuza with a heart of gold. It's so over the top and so silly, and yet it's a lot of fun.
It's the opposite of a kick the puppy moment.
Oh, really is.
You actually save the puppy moment.
Yeah, it's super fun. Like, I didn't know this was what I needed. I kind of downloaded it because I was like, oh, that's cheap and I've got nothing to do right now, and I'm really digging it. So I'm probably not going to play all 7 60-hour Yakuza games, but I enjoyed saving the dog. It was fun. So I've got my $20 worth. Nate, what's making you happy this week?
Yeah, I've got something that's been making me really happy. I got a new little a musical toy here. It's a
I know what that is.
It's by a company called Teenage Engineering. It is a little. They make a whole series of these things called pocket operators, and it is a synth and drum machine that can fit in the palm of my hand. They've built the entire case, the entire sort of all the mechanism is built into this LCD display, and so it looks like a super old school like calculator.
It looks like a broken Nintendo Game & Watch.
It does. It's like an exposed chipset, but it's actually a 16-note sequencer. So this is the P012 by Teenage Engineering. And so this is just like a really simple beat that you can do with it, though.
Oh, it's got blinking lights. Now that's exciting.
Oh, yeah. So, well, it's a 16 note sequencer, so you can see it's running the sequence on the board.
Oh, neat.
And then it's got different functions or effects you can patch in.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I have seen some videos of folks playing around with those. They have a whole series of them, and you can apparently daisy chain them with chords so you can have them all play together. You can make some really, really neat chiptune music with those.
Yeah,
I believe I solved a puzzle involving those at an intern puzzle day in Seattle for Microsoft.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Those are really, really cool. Nate, I'm glad you got one.
Really
You'll have
cool.
to send me make some piece of music for the show and send it to us, and we'll include it on this or a future episode.
This is just the drum machine. It's just called Rhythm, but I'm going to get more of them. And yeah, you can daisy chain them. So a fun little thing about them. So it has a little LCD display where they all have these like little characters. So it has a sewing machine on it.
I don't know. It's amazing.
This little guy who every sound you make, it like has a little visual of him like hitting little hammers on things. It also has a clock, and this thing can act as an alarm clock.
Nice. So. Useful. That makes it a practical purchase, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was worth it. So this is making me super happy.
Man, me too. Well, thank you guys for joining us this week on The Short Game. If you are interested in sticking around, we will have a spoiler section post right now. So thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. I'm Reagan Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. That's RayGank. And you can find our show on Twitter at _shortgame, which is a great place to let us know what games you think we ought to be playing. So thanks again to Christian on Twitter. That's at IG_enthusiast on Twitter for recommending this game, which we totally dug. Thanks again, Christian. If you want to be like Christian, drop us a line on Twitter or on our website, www.theshortgame.net, where there's a contact form, and you can let us know what games you think are short and good. And Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at NateSTL.
And Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And ladies and gentlemen, here it is, your spoiler break. So, what do we think actually happened in this world?
It seemed like the ocean is dried up, but it's not as if there's been, nuclear fallout. There are rams. There's no people whatsoever, but it seems like this girl's been abandoned almost, or that the landscape is desolate. Like maybe everyone has moved on and she couldn't leave for some reason. Like, my headcanon, this is kind of dark, like her dad was sick and she stayed with her dad until the last moment.
Yeah.
And then she took off after everybody else.
It seems like, you start the game in that area that seems to be like a dried up sea. At first, you start seeing these gigantic machines that turn to be the sort of super tankers with legs. And I thought, they mechanized to the point of killing the world. But actually, I think that the machines with legs came later. It seemed like it was a sort of like, well, the world dried up. I mean, we've seen global warming. Like,
And you need landwalkers because
there's
only
no
have
boats. Yeah, you can't go from place to place on boats anymore. So they've got these gigantic legged boats.
And the machine, there's one part where you go and you get your wheels replaced and they give you the achievement, Pimp My Ride. And to me, that was literally a place to convert sailboats into cars.
I think you're probably right. Yeah. Or, yeah.
Repair or conversion, at least. Yeah.
So I think that the girl's dad was one of the inventors that helped create those gigantic legged boats. Because when you get into that one gigantic legged boat, there are portraits of the dad and his locomotive, the one that you're driving, along with what looked like another inventor. And it showed like later models were the gigantic legged walking super tankers. And I got the impression that the dad of the main character had some kind of falling out with the super tanker inventor guy. Maybe I'm inventing all of this myself, but it seemed like he wanted these smaller wheelie things like what you were driving, and the other guy wanted these gigantic super tankers or something like that, and they had some kind of a falling out. And well, I guess we see how that turned out because there's dead super tankers littering the landscape.
That's funny. I had a much more peaceful one where I thought, perhaps that your dad invented the little one, and because it was not as the oceans drying up was just affecting smaller areas, but then like it affected larger and larger areas, and you needed the big land cruisers to get everyone out, and you're just kind of like last, captain on the Titanic, last one to leave the ship. You're kind of the last boat out, or the little ones. For the little people, for the last people remaining are taking the little ones forward.
Yeah, I think it's hard to really guess, but it does sort of seem like, maybe we should talk about the ending itself. Like, where is she going for all of this time? Well, she was trying to get to the ocean. I loved that last scene. It's like, oh, there is still an ocean. And just as the credits as it's sort of fading out and the credits are starting to roll, like her boat is dead. She lights that pyre at the end of the dead beach covered in dead vehicles. And at first I thought like, well, that's desperate. That's desolate. There's all these dead vehicles on the shore. But then there's the foghorn of a ship. I'm like, oh, she was just trying to get to, somebody's there to pick her up.
That's so funny because I saw all those dead ships and I thought, oh, they're abandoned ships because there's a harbor, or like there's a hope, like you don't need the ships anymore.
Yeah, I saw those dead ships and I thought abandoned. Like, well, this is terrible. Lots of people have died here and she's going to die here too.
I thought canoes at like summer camp were like a long time ago everyone got to this point and then they like Giver style like got off the raft and ran or something.
Yeah, I think it does have a sort of the only thing I think that left me feeling hopeful at the end of this was that foghorn sound at the end when she's lit the pyre, and I thought, well, fuck. And then the foghorn. I loved that. Like, I was comparing the ending of this and of Inside, but they both end on a beach. Like, I was like, oh, neat.
Well, I guess I did. Maybe it's because my backstory was for the dad was hopeful, was like evacuation and everyone's out. Like it made me think she's maybe not the only one. She's just the only one.
She's not the only one left in the world. She's just the only one left on this continent or something like that.
Yeah, because she was with her father and he was, leading the evacuation or something. And and then he died. And so she has to go on her own on the journey. And I think it was funny because you get to go light your lighthouse pyre, whatever you want to call this, and there's just this bird there, and it clearly starts slowly panning out like this is the end of the game. And I was like, it's just gonna be me and this bird. I was like, hey, at least I get to hang out with a living creature. And then the bird flies away.
No.
I was like, no, my bird friend. So they let you move around as it fades to black. They give you complete character control. So I kind of like, it's like, oh, wonder what happens if I put like, there's a big pile of, there's fuel left by the pyre, which is another hopeful thing to me. Like they give you fuel to put it. So then I put all of the fuel in the fire. And I was like, oh, I'm a jerk. What if someone else comes? They're going to die because I wasted all the fuel. And then I thought to myself, like, oh, I could have just stood there and let this be a peaceful moment, but this game has taught me that I need to continuously be doing something.
Continue to burn.
So then I
things.
just kind of jumped around for a bit like a goof, but
I did the same.
Yeah, when they let you move around, like you can just do stupid stuff or you can have a meaningful moment. But it's just it's a funny thing that they let me have like a weird character beat where I was like, maybe I can just fill this up and it'll give me a different ending. I don't think so.
But yeah.
No,
yeah.
why?
I loved the ending though. I really, really liked it. I when I negatively compared it in contrast to Inside, that is only because I think Inside has one of the best endings of a video game ever. This game had a fantastic ending for this game, and I really, really liked it. So I absolutely encourage anybody who likes the sorts of games that we like to play this game. It's great if you haven't already. And I don't know if I have.
Before we wrap up, how sad were you when the ship broke in half?
God,
Did you know what to do next?
No, I was like, oh no, am I gonna have to walk the rest of the way? And then I finally figured out that you could kind of still get it to run, and I was like, oh, this is painful. This is so painful to see. I
walked all the way to the right until I hit a branch and was like, oh, nope, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'm supposed to keep trying for my ship.
Make the poor thing, work. You can't fill the tank anymore after that.
You can just kind of sail with the wind, though.
Yeah. That was really melancholy. Like, it felt sad because that boat, I mean, it's sort of a cliche to say like the boat is like a character, but it's like a character. It's like the main thing that you relate to in the game, and it feels sort of like the girl's protector, And then when it finally breaks, it almost feels like it's, the poor boat gave up its life for you or something like that. I know that's sort of silly or cliched, but it was very emotional when the boat finally was destroyed.
Yeah, all the hooks I think are on the not destroyed part of your ship, but I think I had left my sailboat on the other side of the ship because I was out of hooks, and so I was like, and you cannot get to that side of the ship once it's dead. I was just like, my thing,
no,
my thing. I was so sad about the ship, but also really sad about my sailboat. R.I.P.
R.I.P. boat / Okomotive. Well, I don't know if I have much left to say about this game other than that I really liked it. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. We are coming back next week with an episode on the latest game by Mike Bithell, who we've talked about endlessly on this show before. Thomas Was Alone, Volume, his Bithell short of last year, Subsurface Circular. This is a sort of pseudo sequel in spirit to that, and a similar sort of vibe and playstyle of game, Quarantine Circular, which he did another awesome launch of just tweeting, hey, I've got this new game that I haven't announced. Here it is. It's out right now. Here you go. It's on Steam for $5 or I guess it was $6. So if you liked his games, check it out. We're going to be discussing it in depth next week. It's probably going to be a very short section before the spoiler break. It's going to be mostly spoilers next week. So if you're interested, I would play that in advance if you got a second to do it. And that game was less than 3 hours, so easy to pack in before our next episode. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.